Good morning, Turtle fans. Welcome to the first ever virtual 2020 San Diego Comic-Con, the mothership of all Comic-Cons. I'm Chris from the Old Turtle Den YouTube channel, your panel host today, as we celebrate the 30th year anniversary of the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, with two of the people responsible for this classic film reaching the big screen in 1990. That would be producer Kim Dawson and screenwriter Bobby Herbeck. How you doing, guys?
Great. Hey,
Chris. Great, Chris. Thanks for having us, buddy.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this. This is a big movie for a lot of people. And I guess the best place to start is, how did this come together?
Well, I'll field that question first, Chris. You know, it was funny because I was working with a guy named Gary Proper. I had been working at Showtime producing a bunch of different shows, and he managed a comedian by the name of Gallagher who used to smash watermelons in his show. Anyway, we were in his office one day. I was there with his wife and one of our other PAs that worked for us. Gary was on the road with Gallagher in Detroit, Michigan, and he wandered into a comic book store and found the first edition of the comic, which he then called me immediately and said, "Dude, you gotta check this comic out. It's going to be our first movie." And I went, "I can't believe you're talking about that." I couldn't understand what he was talking about. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'd never heard of them before. So he overnighted me the comics. And the next day we got them and we were looking at them. We were, of course, laughing and having a good time. And he goes, "Dude, we can make these movies into the greatest films of all time." And I'm going, "I don't know what you've been smoking." It's like, but then as we started to get into it and understood what it was all about, the more we read Kevin and Peter's words and saw the pictures, we understood that it could be made into a live action picture. So we started researching. I called Mirage Studios immediately, and they turned me on to a guy named Mark Friedman, who ran Surge Licensing at the time. And Mark had met Kevin and Peter a couple of weeks before that and signed them into a merchandise and licensing deal where he would represent them. And after a little protracted negotiation, they signed the deal, and that's how we optioned the rights. And that was in the fall of 1987. And we started negotiating and started pitching. We started gathering all the materials together that the old comics, and they had a few sample toys, because Mark had put together a deal almost immediately with Playmate Toys. If you remember, that was the very first real kids toy that came out. And they were just getting ready to launch that toy in 1988's Toy Fair, which was in February of 88. And I knew Bobby from a variety of things. He was doing a lot of work in both writing and doing stand-up comedy and warm up for a bunch of different things. I'll let him talk about that. But he seemed like a perfect writer because he had a great sense of humor. And so I sent him a copy of the comics and said, "Meet me as soon as you can." And I'll let Bobby tell you where we met, because it was the coolest meeting.
Yeah, there should be a plaque there. We met at the In-N-Out Burger in Westminster, California, and sat on the grassy knoll. And I was writing a movie for Golden Harvest, and Kim just knew that, because he knew me. And again, before I go any further, everything's about timing. This is a timing story. And Kim's timing, Gary's timing, everybody's timing was perfect. And he brings it to me while I'm writing for Golden Harvest, which Kim knew I was writing a movie for Golden Harvest. And Kim also knew they made the Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan films. And they had the best martial arts guys, because Kim's idea and Gary's was, you put the best martial arts guys, and Kim will correct me if I'm wrong, in these costumes, and then you just dub the voices later. This was just kind of the way they were looking at it at the beginning. So he brought me some tapes and told me that it was a kid's show on TV. It had been on for a bit, and I got it right away. So I took it to my boss, Tom Gray at Golden Harvest, who just looked at me like I was, there's again, which would seem to be a theme throughout the whole process. And he just said, "Herbs, don't bother me with this Ninja Turtle stuff. Just finish the movie I'm paying you to write." And I kept after him, what, Kim, for several weeks.
Months, Bobby, as it turns out, because at the same time, Chris, Gary and I put together these packages with Bobby, and we started going out to the studios, thinking that, you know, we had a great the comics were really a storyboard in a lot of ways. So we had the ability to talk about the pictures. We had the mock-up toys and the press kit from Playmates. So it felt like we had all the ingredients necessary to make a deal. And everywhere we went, the very first guy we went to was a guy named Peter Chernin, and Peter was had been the president of Showtime when I was there, and then he went over and started running a company called Lorimar Pictures. And Peter went, same reaction that Tom Gray had, like, what are you guys talking about? There's
everywhere.
No way. You know, keep in mind, the timing of this was Howard the Duck had just been in the theaters and had completely tanked. And secondly, I think Garbage Pail Kids was had been made, and it tanked. And so live action pictures made from comic books were not at the top of everybody's in the studio heads lists, right? Well, it was, and we just kept getting one rejection after another. It was well, and every time I told young people about it, they all got it. So I felt, well, we just didn't give up, right?
This is where, for me, as I went out and pitched, it was laughed out of several pitch meetings, by the way. I mean, they would snigger through the whole meeting and then call my aide to say, who's the guy smoking pot that came in here with the turtles? And my aide says, I don't know about the pot, but the turtles thing is real. And what I was finding out was that it was the kid's secret. You have to remember, this is before iPads and cell phones and what the kids had when you were a kid, Chris. You had TV shows, you know, unless I'm not guessing your age properly.
No, it's absolutely correct.
So TV was a go-to spot, and the parents were busy. Like the parents, you know, the babysitter today is the iPad. You're a dad, and the Xbox and all of that, which didn't exist then. Pong existed then.
Right.
And anyway, I realized that the parents, by Tom Gray, that he didn't have a clue what these were, and most of the parents didn't know what it was until the TV shows started building and drawing the kids' audience, which was becoming a massive audience. And then the merchandise started growing along with that, and all of a sudden that's on the shelves, and the kids, Mommy, Daddy, I want to be Raphael. They didn't know what the hell they were talking about. Right. I can say that one word. Hell's okay. And anyway, I said to Tom Gray, after several attempts with him, and he really was about ready to fire me because I kept bugging him about it. One night we went and had a drink, and I realized he had a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. I believe that's about how old his kids were then at home. And my thought was, I just told Tom, you got 2 kids at home. Just ask them about the turtles. Now, we're in Beverly Hills. I lived in Long Beach. When I got back to Long Beach that night, which takes about an hour, there's a message on my recorder call, which for you young folks was the early answer machine. It was called a recorder call. And Tom leaves a message, Herb's Babes. Now, those 2 words means you close the deal. Herb's is a nickname, and Babes means, I love you, babe. Means, I think I've closed the deal. He said, Herb's Babes, get your buddy and meet me tomorrow morning for breakfast in Westwood, and let's talk about this. All of a sudden, he started to see the light. Wow. And then I got a hold of Kim. Kim drove up from Newport. We drove into Westwood and did the dog and pony show with him. And he still wasn't by sliding out of the booth. When he gets interviewed, he says the movie was saved by one butt cheek. He had one butt cheek off the booth about to exit, and Kim pulled him back in with.
Well, it was all about how we could keep the budget down. We didn't have to hire big, expensive actors because the actors who had to be in the suits were going to be stuntmen for the most part. And whether we replaced their voices or not, which ended up happening as it turns out, we weren't going to have to pay a lot of money for actors. And because Golden Harvest had studios in Hong Kong, they've been making all the Bruce Lee films, and then they made the Jackie Chan films. So they had all that infrastructure in place. The one thing that we had negotiated with the Mirage guys is that they would get approval, they'd get input on the script, but they'd get approval over the costumes. So once Tom got the idea that they could do this movie affordably, and he got the idea that the toys were going off. Toy Fair was in February of '88, and by June the toys were on the shelf. And it was then that everybody in the world sort of went, oh, wow, what are these things? Because I don't know if you ever heard the stories about they actually brought turtles in costumes to New York City, and they staged this big thing where they blew a manhole cover off and steam came out, and then the turtles emerged from it.
Oh,
and then walked into the Javits Center. And it created a huge storm of publicity.
Oh,
But
wow.
that came on the heels of like the Murakami and Wolf cartoon series that had been done between Christmas and New Year's of '87. That's when they produced that series. Basically, Playmate Toys commissioned it in order to get the toys popularized by young kids, and they kept repeating those five episodes of that cartoon. So all through the spring, the kids were angsting over the fact that the toys were coming out in June. So when they did hit the shelves in June of '88, they went off. And it was sort of by that time that Bobby and I had finally made the deal with Tom, and
everything happened. I'm sorry, kid. Everything happened fast. Once Tom got it and put the pieces together, I mean, within I would say a week, 2 weeks, Tom calls me and said, Herbs, pack a suitcase. We're going to Northampton, Mass. We got to meet Peter and Kevin and convince them we're the company to do this movie. And I mean, it's like it just, once the light went off, right, Kim?
Yeah.
We were rolling.
Right.
And so he and I go to Northampton and meet Peter and Kevin. We spent part of a day with them, and they were like, yeah, well, go for it. And we come back, and on the way back, Tom says, when you get back, have you got a trunk? I said, yeah. He said, well, pack that trunk because you're going back. Oh, no, I got that wrong. That was England. He said, when you get back, don't unpack your suitcase because you're going to go back there in 2 weeks because they have to sign off on the story, which would be the treatment for the script, which somebody had asked in the Q&A about a treatment. It was several treatments before we got the one they wanted because they wouldn't always agree. And I could tell by their body language when I would meet them in the mornings, a couple of days in between each treatment, that either by Peter looking down at the floor, man, he didn't really like the story, and Kevin looking up. They're two good guys, but two extremely different people, as you probably know. I'm sure you've interviewed them. And it took a little time. It wasn't like a couple of days. It took a little time, and then they finally signed off on it. And then I came back, and Kim's working on the production side. I'm just working on the writing side. I come back, and they've hired Steve Barron, the director, and Simon Fields, producer. And next thing I know, we had a dinner together in Long Beach. The night I met Steve Barron and Simon Fields. Next thing you know, it's pack a trunk. You're going to England to write the movie because that's where Steve Barron was. That was his home. That's where he was.
Right.
And I don't know if people know, Steve was claimed to fame at that point. He made music videos, some of the best music videos, right, Kim?
Yeah. Well, he'd done Billie Jean with Michael Jackson at that point, and that had been, I think it was the biggest music video of all time. And there was a time in Hollywood when studios were going, let's hire music video directors because they can work fast, and they're generally not members of the DGA, so they can work relatively less expensively than big Hollywood directors. Because of Steve, that the picture really came together, because he had this vision after having read the comics, met Bobby, met the boys. They had this treatment, and he saw it. He had worked on a movie called Dark Crystal, and that's where he met Jim Henson and Brian Henson, who at that point was living in London. So, but to back up a little bit, it was right before Bobby actually went to Northampton. I had moved to Orlando to produce the Mickey Mouse Club, and even though we had these ongoing meetings, it felt like it was still tentative. Tom called me one day and said, you got to come to New York because we've got to finish signing the deal. Before we go forward any further, we've got to sign the deal. And we met in Midtown, somewhere around 46th Street, I think, and Park Avenue. And so we met, and I met Mark Friedman for the first time. And Mark was really charged with being able to make the business side of the deal work. Finally, in the summer of '88 is when we finally closed the deal, and Bobby started working with Steve.
Yeah, I somewhere near there, because I know I was in when I went to Northampton to work with Peter and Kevin. It was in the fall, and which is the most beautiful time to be in New England. You know that, having gone to college there. And I remember that when I got done with that, and like I said earlier, I came back, and that's when I was told to pack a trunk. And Tom and I met Steve and Simon Field in Northampton again with the boys before we went on to England to work. There was that part of the process. And I think that was just everybody getting all their ducks lined up and make sure everybody was happy and how the process was going to go. And then I flew to England with Steve, and was in London, a week or so. And I just had been there before, and it was just too much partying. And Steve took me out to his country home in Cornwall or something like that. It was like from the movie Straw Dogs, which you wouldn't remember, Chris, but Kim would. Little teeny English town. And that's the first time I heard whenever I'd walk by and hear somebody go, "It's the bloody Yank." I was the bloody Yank. And they were like looking out their windows and peeking at me when I walked. And I was constantly corrected. Where's the post office? You mean the post? No, I mean the post office. No, it's the post. Okay, fine. So, but I went to this house in beautiful little, I think I'm sure I'm making it older than it was, but it was a couple of 100 years old, this little cottage. It was right out of some fairy tale.
Wow.
And I got out there and said to Steve, went out there on a weekend, I says, maybe I should write out here. And he said, really, love? You want to be out here? And I says, I'm not getting much done in London. There's too much action going. I was single. There was a lot of partying. I said, no, I think I'm better out here. I quarantined, as they would say today. So I stayed out there and wrote it. And I'm going to tell you, he laughs at me. That house was haunted. In fact, I was going to write a movie about that cottage, because he had a spiral staircase where you went up to go to bed at night. And one night I turned the lights out, and I go upstairs in the bed, and I'm asleep, and I hear something, some noise, like I would every night. And I open my eyes, and I see the light coming up the spiral staircase. And I go, Steve, are you here? Nothing. And I go, wait a minute, dude. And I slowly go down the stairs, no one there. That house was haunted. That cottage was haunted. And Steve to this day laughs at me about it. No, love, I says, it knew there was a Yank. I could hear the house go, there's a bloody Yank here. But somehow I managed to get the script written out there in the middle of nowhere, England, which is beautiful.
You would have transitioned into the spring of '89 by then. Now keep in mind, Chris, I'm in Orlando most of this time, and we're just about to do the pilot for the Mickey Mouse Club. There was a writer's strike in the summer of '88 that lasted all the way through the end of '88. And even though, so Bobby was sort of working under the table, if you will.
Out of the country.
Well, out of the country. Right? But one of my jobs at doing the Mouse Club was I would host meetings with the executives from Disney. And those executives included Jeffrey Katzenberg and Michael Eisner and Frank Wells, who was killed shortly thereafter in a helicopter crash. But Jeffrey Katzenberg had been one of the very first people that I pitched the movie to. When I first got the job at the Mouse Club, my boss, a guy named Patrick Davidson, had seen the turtle stuff and said, "Oh, that's the coolest stuff." And I said, "Well, yeah, but nobody wants to buy it." He says, "Well, let me take it over to Jeffrey." Well, Katzenberg looked at it and said, same reaction. No, it'll never work. It just won't work. Well, so now, flash forward 6 months, almost a year, and I'm still pitching the idea. Even though we've got it set up with Golden Harvest by now, I've got a poster behind my desk of the toys. That they've done this really cool poster, and Katzenberg looks at that poster and he goes, "It'll never work, Kim. It'll never work." And so that was in the spring of '88 when we're making the pilot. We started producing the series, and then the movie's supposed to start, is scheduled to start in July, but that was the only way it was going to get made was with good costumes. And it was Steve Barron who convinced Brian that this was a great idea, and together they convinced Jim Henson that he should bring the Creature Shop in. And obviously Brian was kind of running the Creature Shop in London, but everything went through Jim at the end of the day. He had basic total creative control. So
what was your reaction when you first saw the Turtles, both of you?
Oh, you mean the actual costumes?
Like the actual turtle costumes.
Yeah, it was mind blowing because up until that time we'd seen toys, you'd seen comics, you'd seen storyboards and all this, but when you saw the actual costumes, they actually came to life. We had this wonderful, particularly Brian and Steve had this rapport with the actors inside the costumes, and the movie was shot in North Carolina, up in Wilmington, and it started in July of '89, and it was hot in Wilmington, like really hot, like 105 degrees, and it would rain every afternoon, thunderstorms and all that. And we were working in sound stages that Dino De Laurentiis had built they had air handlers, but no real air conditioning. The studios were not as well equipped as what I was used to working with at Disney MGM Studios down in Orlando, where we had state-of-the-art stuff. And we even had air conditioning problems down there. Nobody really dialed in air conditioning the right way. And this is in the late 80s, early 90s. Nobody really had an idea how to build sound stages outside of Hollywood.
Lest you forget the airport, too.
Yeah.
You had the airport.
Yeah, it was right next to the airport.
Everything, if I may, and Kim will back me on this, when I get to England and I'm writing this picture, I get a call from Tom Gray, and he says, "Herbs, don't write. Take 10 days off. Go see Europe. Go do something." So I went to France for 10 days to see a buddy of mine, Hang. And we were stopped. And this whole project became a project of stops and starts. It was like pushing a boulder uphill. It was ever going to get made. Just going back to the whole beginning of me pitching it and Kim and Gary pitching it and everybody saying no, and then we get it going. And there was always something seemed to stop the momentum on this picture. And it was like it was cursed almost, And Kim knew more about what was going on. I was like, duh. I was just told, go and enjoy yourself. You're on the clock. You're being paid. You're getting per diem. Go enjoy wherever you want to go. Kim knew what was going on.
Well, as it turns out, Tom Gray had been the head of international sales for 20th Century Fox before he joined Golden Harvest. So he had a lot of experience in international sales, and he had gone to Fox to make a domestic distribution deal because Raymond Chow, who owned Golden Harvest, said the only way this movie gets made and that I finance it is if you have U.S. distribution. Because distribution was always the key to success. Even with the Bruce Lee films, without distribution, you were up against it. So that was the quid pro quo. There had to be a distribution deal in place. And Leonard Goldberg was the president and CEO of 20th Century Fox at the time. Tom had a rapport with him, and they said, yeah, we'll pick the movie up when it's made and distribute it. Well, in May of '89, about 6 weeks before we're scheduled to start, everybody is in Wilmington by now. They're building sets. They're finishing their costumes. So we're 6 weeks out from the start of production, and Leonard Goldberg gets replaced at 20th Century Fox by a guy named Barry Diller. Barry Diller took over and basically wiped the slate clean. They had a slate of films that were scheduled to be made that summer, and he said, none of, particularly the turtle film. I don't want it. It's never going to happen. So it's like, the Murphy's Law was well and truly in place. If it could go wrong, it did go wrong.
Yeah.
So Tom had been pitching. He had pitched, like I had, everybody in Hollywood to see if they'd buy the picture, and he said, the only people who even showed any interest at that point were the guys from New Line. So he went back to Bob Shea, and it was the same repeat conversation. It's the same thing that happened with that Tom did with his kids, and Raymond Chow did. Raymond Chow decided to make the movie. This is secondhand knowledge, but I think it's probably true. He was having lunch with the mayor of Singapore and their wives, talking about business and so forth. Raymond lived in Hong Kong, but he was good friends with the mayor of Singapore apparently, and he was debating whether or not to make the movie. And when he did, he was having this luncheon, and the mayor goes, "Oh, you have no idea how many toys are being sold out of, made in China and sold to the United States. We're doing robust business out of here. You should consider it." And that's what Raymond Chow, what convinced Raymond Chow was the fact that there were all these toys being made in China, his hometown. So with that, the same thing happened with Bob Shea. Bob Shea goes, I'm not really interested. But then Tom goes back to him and says, "Go tell your kids about the Turtles and ask them." And
copycat.
What happened?
Yes.
Wow.
It's the kids, man. It's with kids. We're looking at one of them right here.
Yeah,
Chris.
no, I was one of them. Yes.
Yeah. When did you first? Did you go to the movie in the theaters, Chris?
I was about 3 years old when it came out. My faintest memory, and I don't know if it was of the first movie or Secret of the Use, was at a drive-in theater.
Really?
Yeah, we saw it twice.
What?
I remember, because the second time I was falling asleep. I was very young. It's one of my earliest memories that I have of the movie. And then just summers and vacations with cousins and friends years after. It's just that movie went into VHS players. The parents ordered pizza, and it was nonstop memories.
I think that first Halloween is what really, birthday parties, but that first Halloween is what really got them going, launched them. Because everybody was in it. I have friends of mine who have I had one recently who sent me videos of his kid playing Shredder in a costume, and the kids are all in Ninja Turtle costume, and they are kicking his butt, man. They got little they got all of the Psy, and they got the tan, they got everything, and they're wailing on Hacker. It's very funny, and a lot of people share this over time. Hey, I got a video or a birthday. I had the plumber that just came in the house here sent me a picture of his birthday, his 5th birthday, and he's holding a cake with a Ninja Turtle cake. Wow. It's like a virus, but a good virus, not a bad one. But anyway, if I may, because of time, so we got the picture going, and Kim can fill you in on all the production stuff. I went to Wilmington for one day, and my back was so bad. I was just trying to get through the shoot. I got there one day and called my doctor and alarmed me. He says, "I'm coming back. You got to do my back surgery." I could only stand up to sleep. My back was so bad. So I missed the entire shoot, which was really a bummer. Oh, wow. Once again, another curse. But then we get it. We see the screening. I think I saw.
You're way ahead of it, Bobby. We got to talk about the making of the movie before we do that. Before we get.
Well, that's what I said. That you would fill in the blanks about the whole production side, because I missed it.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Well, Chris, you have any questions about, because the first impression was, what my impression of the Turtles was that the costumes were fantastic. They really did come to life, but they were so complex, these costumes, because they had, I don't know how many servos under the shell. The talking turtles were full of electronics under the shell, and they had a complex water system that was supposed to cool off the actors inside. That also had little electric motors in them that were subject to heat and moisture, as well as all the servos. And of course, the servos operated all the eyes. And there are some pictures online of how complex these characters were, and how much technology was used to build them. And it was a lot of stuff that Jim had and Brian had experimented with, but had never put into action. So these costumes were first and foremost like an experiment. So there was all of that. But at the same time, there was a set of stunt turtles that were much lighter weight. Those guys could really move much easier in those costumes and do all the, so all the fight scenes were done with the stunt turtles. And I was amazed at first because while they looked exactly the same, they couldn't move the same. The guys in the talking turtles, while they could move, they weren't nearly as nimble as the stunt turtles.
Wow.
And I remember seeing so many different fight scenes where the guy who choreographed the picture was a guy named Pat Johnson. And Pat was, he did all the Three Ninja movies and all of that stuff. He was a classic fight choreographer, and he really was. He and Steve and Brian was the chief puppeteer, but he was also the second unit director. So he was in charge of all of the fight scenes, as well as all of the intricate, close-up work that the Turtles did across the board. So anything that wasn't a main thing was under Brian's direction. And but fortunately, he and Steve worked so well together, and they had this mindset that they were almost like they could finish one another's sentences. It seemed to me.
And it seems like they continue to work together.
The what?
I've seen Hallmark specials that they've worked on together and stuff.
I think they have a wonderful rapport with one another. I think they go back to this age where because they're about the same age, and because they kind of grew up in the business together. I think they were probably friends and colleagues long before they were workmates, so to speak. So I think that's sort of was the foundation of their relationship. But
they're also two very, very nice gentlemen, man. You got it. They're cool. Steve is cool. Brian is beyond. They're cool.
Yeah,
they're like a good marriage is what it was.
But it was funny because Judith was saying to Steve that he very seldom lost it because Judith called it Major Turtle Meltdown. When the turtle costumes quit, and which they did pretty regularly, whenever it got above 80 degrees, the heat inside the costumes would go up, and all of a sudden these guys were, and it was like going to battle every day to try and get these scenes made. And I remember that Tom Gray was frustrated by the lack of consistency from one day to the next. But the costumes had been built in the Creature Shop in London, where they didn't have anywhere near the kind of conditions that they ended up with in Wilmington. So it was a challenge, to be sure. But Steve was like unflappable. He would work through it. He'd figure out what to do next. And while everybody else is freaking out trying to figure out what they could do next, Steve was methodical, and because he was all about performance. He needed the turtles to be, it's funny because while they are costumes, they have a human quality to them that is completely unique. I think in a tribute to Jim Henson and the Creature Shop, because they were able to make them human. And I think that's what separates them from the new iterations of the Turtles that are more CGI, or all CGI, I should say.
Yeah, let's not give all of our documentary away here, partner.
I know, right?
I'd like to just tell us the week of the opening, what happened, if I may. That Tom Gray was convinced he had Howard the Duck. He was like waiting for his first child to be born. He was a wreck. And he and I were in Beverly Hills driving to lunch, and we're at Wilshire in Santa Monica. And he said, "Herbs, what do you think we're going to do?" I said, "I think it's going to do 20 million, which was really a big number back then."
Yeah.
And he goes, 20 million? I think we got Howard the Duck. I said, "You have an audience built in. Howard the Duck just dropped out of the sky."
Right.
And he said, Herbs, if we do 20 million, Golden Harvest will buy you anything you want. And right then, a 2-seater Mercedes pulled up, convertible. And I said, I want one of those in black. And he said, you got it. Well, the movie opened up at how much, Kim?
Yeah, 25 million that first weekend.
25 mil. And I just want to make this clear. To this day, I've never seen that 2-seater Mercedes. Welcome to show business, right? He called me from New York and said he was so excited the day because it opened in New York first. And he said, Herbs, they're lined up 2 blocks around the corner to get in the seats. He was blown away, you know. And none of us, and honestly, none of us thought, I mean, it's here with 30 years later that we would be celebrating, let alone still be here to talk about it. Yeah. 30 years later, this thing is still as strong as ever. It's just gone to the next generation. Thank God, it's a blessing.
Yeah,
really a blessing, because you don't get this much in the business unless you're, you know, George Lucas or someone like that's fine. On Spielberg, you rarely get something like this in your life that comes by. You might have a hit, but not like this. And I thank my buddy Kim for bringing that to me, and Peter and Kevin for creating it. That's for darn sure.
Yeah, and you know, without it's, you know, it's things like this happen for a reason, and there was a series of events. And for me, it all goes back to Gary when he got that comic, because you know, without that, we wouldn't have ever even known about it. But you know, it's like Bobby said, it's all an issue of timing. Everything fell in place just the right way, even though we had all these hurdles to keep going over. So.
It was timing, and it was also we you know, when I go talk to young kids and stuff, because they're interested in the story of this or the success of this, I tell them that if you really believe in something, you don't give up, because we got a lot of no's, and no's not an answer necessarily. And Kim had my back, I had his, we've had each other's back, and Gary, rest his soul, we believed in it, and it was just, we finally got people turned around. And there's a lot, and the critics beat the hell out of this movie. Right. They said, you know, Leonard Maltin, worst movie I've ever seen. And I waited all these years to meet him. I never got to go, Nainer, 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 and have like a turtle shirt and his jacket. Because the critics don't know. The kids, you know, it's the audience. The kids are what, and what happened also in the crafting of the script was the script was written in such a way that it was written to a level of between parents and kids, not written down to kids.
Yes. Because
then the parents would go home and say, hey, Joyce, you got to take Kenny and go see this movie. It's really a fun movie, and it's, you know, it's great. Yep. Because the parents, there's something for every age, and and some good messages. And I think that's the success, Kim will tell you, is you got to have people come back and see it again.
Well, yeah, and that's a tribute to Mark Friedman, because he put together these licensing deals with Ralston Purina. And I don't know if you know this, but Ralston Purina made a Turtles cereal back in that I think it released around Christmas of right before the movie came out. And there was a 2-for-1 coupon on the back of the cereal box. And the first week, and it may have only been a good coupon for like 2 weeks of the movie, but that brought people back to the theaters a couple of times, because and the fact that there was another movie in the theaters at the time called Pretty Woman. It opened a week before us, and it was #1 against all the critics' reviews, because the critics panned it too. And for almost 3 months, we went back and forth, #1, #2, #2, #1. It was amazing. And ironically, about the third week in, Jeffrey Katzenberg, who's running Disney Studios at the time, I think it was a Hollywood Pictures movie, comes out and starts a campaign that says, well, if you've been to the Turtles, you ought to come see the Pretty Woman. And it was like one of those, because they were, not that Pretty Woman was a family picture, but a kid's picture, but that we did kind of key off of one another's advertising campaigns, and that went on for almost 6 weeks. I think there was just back and forth in the LA papers, at least. I don't know if the ad campaign played anywhere else, but in LA there were billboards about where Pretty Woman and Julia Roberts and Michelangelo were best friends, right?
Hey, Kim, wow. Hey, Kim, here's another irony. when we got the award, was it People's Choice Award, the award show that we went and we were all at, and that was when we were fighting Iran, Iraq, whatever was Desert Storm or whatever was going on then. And I said, send the Turtles over there and this war will be over in about an hour. But do you remember who the hosts were of that show?
It was Julia Roberts.
Garcia and Julia Roberts. And I just made that connection. That's a small, no wonder she wasn't real friendly with us. Anyway.
So there has been some questions from the fans that have been asked to you guys. And I don't know if you guys want to go over through a couple of them, but
sure.
Here's one from SKR Imaging. And their question is, who drew the designs of the first movie's Turtles? They remain the best interpretation on the big screen, yet I have no idea who is responsible.
I think it would be the Creature Shop. I think you'd have to give with Steve Barron. I think it, clearly Kevin and Peter had a hand in that as well because they were artists. But I think it had to be the artists in the Creature Shop that drew those characters and made them what they were.
Yeah, good question.
Next one is from Nake ID Munster, and they ask, "What is your favorite / most memorable moment you wrote for the film?" So I think that's more towards you, Bobby.
Would that be my favorite in the process of writing or in the film? What's in the film?
Yeah.
Probably both. We could go with both.
Well, my favorite thing was meeting Peter and Kevin, and then going to England and watching this thing, like we said earlier, Kim, watching this thing evolve from a page to a big screen. We went to the screening and saw it, the rough cut. And it's wow, and you get goosebumps. You go, wow, there it is. And seeing the Hensons take it from little clay figures and just build it into the costumes, which I had a chance to go over there a couple of times when I was over in London. They were doing that, and just watching the whole thing evolve. And I got a lot of favorite scenes in the movie. It's a Kodak moment's one of my favorite scenes. Domino's Pizza thing, and probably one of my other favorite is when they bring April downstairs unconscious and they say to Splinter, "Can we keep her?" That had all kinds of connotations for me. So that's
those
three of them.
Scenes. Yeah, those are
Yeah.
great. Next one is from Toidle Soup. They ask, who were your favorite characters to write?
Mine? All of them.
All of them.
Yeah, they all were a different I mean, first of all, Peter and Kevin, set them in stone. I mean, they were there. All I did as a writer, and even Todd did the same, was reshape them a little bit. I think everybody had a hand in it. I said to you earlier, of the four personalities, Raffi's very much my personality, the sulker, the type A, But I spent so much time with them writing and getting into them. And if Kim will allow me, I watched Star Wars, it seemed like 100 times, because I looked at every battle in that movie to see when they had a battle, and I realized there was a theme for every battle. It wasn't just, gee, we're 7 minutes in, we need to have a battle, an action scene. There was a theme to each fight, each battle scene, and I tried to bleed that into the Ninja Turtle. Whenever there was a fight going on, there was a theme behind it, because that was kind of the message Splinter was making anyway. You're on defense, you're not on offense. You don't pick the fight.
Right.
But you finish the fight like he did at the end of the movie.
Right. That's really cool.
Yeah. Now, my favorite character always has been Mikey, because he reminds me of Gary proper. And because Gary was always cowabunga. Gary was a surfer, grew up surfing in Cocoa Beach, and he was a radical kid. And he was always like, that's his personality was reflected in Michelangelo in a way that is still very meaningful to me, for sure.
Casey Jones is very much James Dean to me, and a little bit of De Niro. He looked like De Niro to me. He does. Elias looks like he could be De Niro's son. But I always had kind of a James Dean thing about him. He was just cool, and he's just, as a person, the actor himself is a very cool person. So
the best portrayal of Casey Jones.
Huh?
It's the best portrayal of Casey Jones, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I think she was the best April.
Yeah,
and this
that
was
too.
a problem. A lot of us didn't get to do the sequel because it got down to money. Because when you go to do the sequel, you've been the first one, the industry, the union says you have a cloak. You were paid so much, they have to pay you more for the second go around. And Raymond Chow had very short arms, and he didn't bring a lot of people back. Kim will back me on it. Kim and Gary were smart because they had a 3-picture deal on it, so I didn't. Son of a.
Next,
right, just a couple more. We're going to run out of time here.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
We have an hour.
the next one is from TMNT Collector NL, and it says, "Will you ever make a TMNT movie again?"
Well, we would love to do a reboot, but
Yeah, there's a lot of energy around this film and trying to do it again. I think that there's that when we did this pizza party recently, there was a lot of people weighing in on that when we were getting all these comments, and there's certainly a lot of energy around it. From your lips to God's ears.
yeah.
Yeah,
because Paramount has the rights, Viacom, so it would be almost a miracle. But what's nice is our fan base keeps saying they liked the first version of the Turtles as opposed to the new version. If nothing else, the look and the characters and the personalities. So
it's absolutely a phenomenal film.
Yeah.
Huh?
It's absolutely a phenomenal film. It's still the best version.
It still holds up,
Yep.
man. I'm not just beating the drum here. I watched it recently and went, God, this thing, I always hated the little hand puppet pizza thing. And when I saw it in the rushes, I said to Tom Gray, now that's not going to be in these. No, we're gonna do that better. And then the movie comes out and I said, they left that scene in. Now I love it because it's funny. It's campy to me. Pizza! But it's almost like someone's got a puppet sock on, right? Doing that scene. So.
All right, so we got a couple more. This one's from Anthony San Diego. They ask, what was your main motivation and biggest fear during the process of writing the TMNT movie?
My main motivation was to write a picture that was going to possibly be a hit. And the other motivation was to make as much money as I possibly could writing the picture.
Yeah.
And my biggest fear was that I was writing a picture that people would go see and that would be accepted, and then Todd came in to write some more on it, and he did a great job. So, I mean, it was a team effort, but all the way around a team effort, from the Hensons to me, to Todd, to Steve, to Kim, to Gary, to everybody.
Right.
So,
what about you, Kim, during instead of writing, though, producing?
I think it was, when you're a producer, it's all about budget at the end of the day. You have to make your days, and we were going over budget. It was clear from the very beginning that there was going to be overtime that was not planned. And also, it was taking a toll on the actors. It was a brutal production schedule, not because it was planned out properly, but just the logistics of getting the costumes to work every day, the heat in Wilmington, and just one thing after another. There were just a lot of physical challenges, I think, for the film. And it was, while it doesn't look terribly dangerous, there were a lot of stunts that required really, really significant stunt work that was probably, it was dangerous. And I think there are some people who got hurt. So that's always a concern as a producer. You want everybody to be safe and well, and you want to finish your days on time, and that wasn't happening. So
the timing and choreography in the fight scenes, which Kim certainly knows, to me, it was brilliant. And the costumes were so ahead of their time.
Yeah.
That whole thing the Hensons did was cutting edge, man. You're talking 30 years ago.
Yeah.
No CGI here. It's the real deal.
Yeah, and I feel like, just my opinion, the human eye can detect CGI. When you see actual light source hitting your characters, it just seems to have a better effect.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
There's one more question, and this was just kind of a general one from a bunch of people on social networks and just different interviews you guys have done, and that is, will there possibly be a reboot of the first and best TMNT film?
Well, like you said earlier, I'll go to you, Kim. I'm sorry, buddy.
I think we've sort of answered that question. We would hope there would be, but with today's technology, I think if you know, the key to it would be Brian and Steve. If they would agree to do it, and we could get, you know, it's a lot of logistics, and you know, right now Viacom and Nickelodeon have a lot invested in the new look, which you know, but you never know. Remakes oftentimes do really well. There's some classic examples of great remakes. So, you know, we're not going to quit trying. That's for sure.
Like we did with the original movie, you know.
Yeah.
And you never know what happens. And I'll leave you with this. That you probably know Chris that Saturday Night Live last month did a Teenage Mutant Ninja Middle-Aged Turtles.
Yes.
Sketch, right?
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
A couple of years ago, Mel Brooks. I dropped the name. Let me pick that up. Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks loved this movie. I went into Fox commissary with this jacket on when the movie was in the theaters, and he saw it. A buddy of mine wrote with him. He wanted to meet me. So we've been friends all these years. And Mel, when I see him, we'd exchange ideas. And when I saw him several years ago, and he said to me, "It's now time for Teenage Mutant Ninja Grandfather Turtles." And maybe that's what we do. Teenage Mutant Ninja Grandfather Turtles.
I don't know. We'll see.
It would be campy. I think it would be cool. But Kim and I, we won't give up. We'll try. We're going to have to go, you know, outside the margins, but maybe we can make it happen. Yep. Fingers crossed.
That would be awesome.
Now, one thing that is going to happen this fall on Labor Day, right now, coronavirus notwithstanding, and movie theaters being able to reopen, Warner Brothers Classic Movies releases this picture, and they have digitally remastered the picture with all the bells and whistles, and apparently it's going to look fantastic. And Fathom Events is planning to do a 2-day screening of the movie around Labor Day. It's still tentative, but it could very well happen, and that might get the interest brewing again. Who knows?
Chris? A national screening, by the way, and what they're trying to sort out right now is it'll be in obviously the major cities, and what they're going to try to do is, like, if it plays near Kim will be at one of the screenings. I'm in Phoenix. I'll go to the Phoenix one. There's going to be some surprises added as we go along. And before we go, Kim, that thing over your shoulder there, which would be your right shoulder, my left, that beautiful Teenage Mutant. That's the script that you had that cover made for, right?
Yeah, this movie.
And I would really like to buy one of those. Hint, hint.
Me too.
And where could we buy one of those, or a shirt or a hat?
Oh, you'll have to go to our website, Bobby.
Thank you very much. Where is that, Kim?
TNMT 033090.
TMNT 033090.com.
Right.
So, I'm loving that, and I don't have one. I'm really not pleased about that.
That script was Gary and I did a few copies of it a little while ago to do as a special for a charity event that we did, and the cover of it has the four weapons on it. So it's
very cool.
Really cool. And the script is actually facing the storyboards, which Steve Barron directed, but there's a storyboard artist on the picture, so it's really cool because you get to see what the director's vision is on every page. It's Listen, before we go, my friend, my longtime friend, who I love very much, and you're my filter because you know me, I fly off. I'm like a 4th of July firecracker that you don't know what's going to happen. But I got to tell you, you have the back of your head is beautiful. I just want you to know that. Lovely. You have all your hair back there. That's wonderful. Chris, do you have anything you want to say, buddy, before we go? Let you go?
No, just thank you for making this amazing film that's been such a large part of so many people's lives and just vacations and time with family and friends. And you guys are a big reason it happened. And it's just amazing to talk with you guys, and thank you so much.
Let me tell you what, my friend, we're only a piece of the pizza that you're on the front of your really cool hoodie. Is that a hoodie you have on?
It's the old Turtle Den logo from the YouTube channel, but
yeah.
Bless you and thank you and everybody out there that are still fans, have kept this thing going on its feet 30 years, the podcast and you doing what you're doing. I mean, that's just, it's awesome, you know. And we thank you for jumping in and being our moderator and host today. We couldn't have picked a better person.
Thank you.
Dude.
Thank you.
guys.
Cowabunga.
Cowabunga. See you later.
Finally, before we go, a big shout out to the whole team at San Diego Comic-Con. They have been great to work with, and I hope this is a huge success.
Warner Brothers is partnering with Fathom Events to bring Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles back to movie theaters this fall in celebration of its 30th anniversary. Get the details at fathomevents.com, and we'll see you on the big screen.